Good morning and welcome to the viewing and listening audience to this, the 25th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. This is the committee's second public hearing with stakeholders pursuant to its inquiry into the state's response to underperformance in primary and secondary schools, the adequacy of the Student Support Services Division, and the impact on school dropouts at the primary and secondary school levels. Members of the public are invited to submit their comments or questions via the Parliament's social media platforms, YouTube channel, ParlView, or via Facebook or Twitter. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at TT Parl Committees. That's TT PARL Committees for real-time updates and highlights from committee meetings. I'm very happy to be with you this morning. This is a very important issue in Trinidad and Tobago. At this point, we would like to invite the members of our stakeholder groups with us to introduce themselves and their teams, starting with the officials from the National Primary Schools Principals Association. Mrs. Scipio Daniel.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all. My name is Monique Scipio Daniel. I am the president of the National Primary School Principals Association, NAPSPA, and with me I have my first vice president, Ms. Colleen Hayes.
Thank you so much. Now, officials from the National Council of Parent Teachers Association, Mr. Stewart.
Good morning, and allow me please, as we are still in the month of January, to wish all of you a very happy new year, prosperity, peace, and productivity in the year 2025. My name is Walter Stewart. I'm the president of the Trinidad and Tobago National Council of Parent Teacher Association Incorporated. With me is Mrs. Gina Ramatali, who of course needs little or no introduction, Hummingbird Medal Silver, our first vice president, and also our education officer, Mrs. Ayana Leacock Sargent. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Officials from the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association tutor, Mr. Lumpkin.
Good morning, Dr. Richards. Good morning to the viewing and listening public. Representing tutor this morning, I have Mr. Adish Dwarka, our first vice president, Ms. Marsha Huggins, second vice president, and I am Martin Lumpkin, president of tutor.
Thank you so much. At this time, we'd like members of the committee who are here with us today to introduce themselves, starting as Member Mohit.
Good morning. Pardon me, please. Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools.
Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. Go ahead. I'm sorry, my apologies. Miss Hicks Rayburn from the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Quite all right. Good morning, Mrs. Hicks Rayburn, Mrs. Charlene Hicks Rayburn, president of the Principals Association. And with me today, we have our first vice president, Mr. David Simon, and our secretary, Mrs. Linus Pitt.
Thank you so much. And now members of our committee, starting with Member Mohit.
Good morning to you, Chairman. Good morning to members of the committee and all groups joining us, entities joining us here today. Looking forward to a productive session. Member Mohit.
Member Ford.
Yes, good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Morning, members of the committee, members to the listening public. Esmond Ford, member.
Member Nakid.
Morning to all. I don't know if you're hearing me, Chairman.
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good morning to all, and looking forward to a productive session.
Member Singh.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, all members. It's a pleasure to be here. Avinash Singh, member.
There's three members who are members of the committee who are unable to be with us today. We acknowledge them nonetheless. Member Roger Monroe, MP. Member Penelope Beckles, MP, and Member Ruhan Sinanan, MP. Thank you all for being here. I'm the chairman, Paul Richards. We'd like to remind both committee members and officials to direct their questions and concerns and comments through the chair. We'll remind members and officials also to kindly activate the microphone on their devices when they are acknowledged by the chair and turn them off when they've concluded their contribution or questions. and the hearing will proceed as we have agreed beforehand. We thank you again for being here with us. The issue that we are having our second inquiry public hearing on is one that is extremely important in Trinidad and Tobago in my view. The objectives include 4 objectives. 1, to assess the current performance levels at key examination checkpoints, namely the SCA, the CSEC, and CAPE checkpoints. 2, to examine the rates of truancy and school dropouts at primary and secondary school levels over the past decade. 3, to evaluate the capacity and effectiveness of the Student Support Services Division, Ministry of Education, to provide adequate support and interventions for students, and to review and analyze the effectiveness of current strategies aimed at addressing underperformance, truancy, and school dropouts at the primary and secondary school levels. The issue is a critical one because it speaks to the developmental objectives of Trinidad and Tobago. And if we have an issue, and we do, with underperformance at different levels, and I can give some data at the SCA level, which is a critical transition level in Trinidad and Tobago from primary to secondary schools, we are going to have issues in several areas in Trinidad and Tobago. 1, national development goals, because an educated population is one of the main drivers of development in any country, particularly strategic development. And 2, we're going to have a problem, or continue to have a problem, with antisocial behaviors and criminality, as we've seen in several different situations. If I could just go through a couple quotations from the newspapers in the last couple of years. Monday, the 21st of December, 2020, in the Newsday features, it quotes the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, as saying, there is a vacuum in the education system. That article is by Rachel Espinay. The Prime Minister believes the education system has lost some of the things of value which have not been replaced. July 2nd, 2022, SCA scores plunge, the Daily Express. Government spends 10 million on SCA remedial classes for 9,000 who scored below 50%. And if we could just, and I'm using the SCA as this jump off point, because as I said, it's a critical transition between primary and secondary school learners. And if we have problems in primary school, a lot of it is being transferred to secondary school. And we have to find the issues that are facing us and come up with productive and effective solutions. So in 2022, 9,000 students scored below 50%. And I'm using 50% as a benchmark, as most jurisdictions would. Our SCA transition grade, I understand, is 30%, which I also have a problem with, but we'll talk about that later on. In 2021, 52.49% scored below 50%, but we were coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and virtual learning, and it is a well-known established fact that full online learning is not as effective as face-to-face learning. We're not the only jurisdiction that suffered from what is described as learning loss. So there was an expectation at some level that there would be some fallout from the rushed and emergency transition during the pandemic and lockdown period to an online learning environment. Since then, there have been a gradual but extremely slight improvement out of that. Only 3% scored in 2021 above 90% or 90% or higher. In 2023, the government, I think government started spending approximately $10 million on remedial interventions to deal with the learning loss experience during the pandemic. 58.06% scored 50% or more, which means 41.94% scored below 50%. So of the 18,797 students who wrote SCA in 2023, 7,875 scored below 50%. That's a cause for concern. In 2024, there was a slight improvement or slight depreciation, where 57.9% scored below 50%. Of the 18,177 students who wrote SCA, 7,652 scored below 50%. And the number that scored above 90 and above went down from 2.11 or 11 in 2023 to 1.4%, scoring 90% or above in 2024. So while we commend the students for giving a lot depends on the system of education within which they're operating. And in modern education paradigms, the onus is on the system to remediate the students' shortcomings and not just blame the students, because there may be very systemic issues that are contributing to this level of underperformance. And I went through the data at the primary level, transitioning to SCA. So if you have 7,875 students scoring below 50%, as is the example in 2023, that underperformance, so that level of performance is being transferred to the secondary level, creating problems in the secondary level also, because then you have to catch up at the secondary level and also deal with the workload in the secondary level, which is much more than the primary level. So we have some issues to discuss, and we're happy that you are here with us today to give us your views and also hopefully come up with some solutions based on your experiences as significant stakeholders in this situation. Ready to move because we have a number of stakeholder groups before us. We're going to go with group by group. We will start with the submissions by the Trinidad and Tobago National Council of Parent Teachers Associations. We will then go to the National Primary Schools Principals Association, and we will go third to the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools, and we will round off with tutor because we only received a short while ago tutor submissions, so we will have to get some time to go through that while we are going through the other groups. So that's how we will go in the round, and we will proceed as such with the questioning. Members will take turns asking questions, and there'll be follow-up questions. And if you have comments yourselves, we'll be happy to field them so we can get some answers and some productive discussions going where this is concerned. So let's start with the Trinidad and Tobago National Council of Parent Teachers Association. And if we could have opening comments from the leader of that delegation, please, at this time.
Sure. Thank you again, and good morning to all. Members, the Trinidad and Tobago National Council of Parent Teachers Associations Incorporated is this year celebrating its 65th anniversary. We were formed on the 23rd of July, 1960, as a result of the need for engagement, partnership, and collaboration between home and school. Our remit, according to our motto, states, home and school united for the good of the child. And all our goals and our objectives, our focus, laser focus as we are, is to ensure that all children, bar none, receive the education that they justly deserve, and that at the end of the day, they would realize their full potential in this society. I want to, as it were, model or repeat some of the expressions of the Honorable Minister of Education just last Friday, as recent as Friday, with the Re-Engaging for Success event held at the Ministry of Education last Friday, honoring and rewarding and awarding, some of our best minds at the CSEC and CAPE level. And she was making reference, as we ourselves have done before at the National PTA, that there needs to be a greater focus and emphasis at the front end, at the ECCE and the primary level, so as to mitigate, minimize, and even eradicate some of the ills taking place at the back end. And the minister, and rightly so, even made further reference to ministries of social development who are allocated at our annual budget, Ministry of Health, Ministry of National Security, and I want to even include Ministry of Youth Development. A lot of money is put into these ministries, which really form the basis of the end result. And if some of these same finances are put into the front end, where we are able to form the foundational basis for our children, it would certainly add more value to the lives of our children. And there will be no need for this expenditure, heavy as it is, at the back end. We want to also look at the quality of our teachers and the emphasis being placed on being able to attract our best minds. Because Dr. Richards, you are correct. Education is the bedrock of national development in any society. And as such, the teachers and the educators who we look up to from time to time, noble as the profession is, we need to ensure that we attract the best minds. And I want to put a plug here in particular for male teachers, because we understand and realize that our males need some kind of role modeling, and they would look up to their sirs and their male teachers in order to accomplish that. So those are my opening salvo statements on the particular topic area, and I look forward to the engagement of the other stakeholders and, of course, your panel, Dr. Richards. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's move now to the opening statements from Mrs. Monica Scipio-Daniel. We're asking that the opening comments be restricted to 2 minutes so we can get on with the interface. Mrs. Scipio-Daniel, please go ahead.
Good morning, Dr. Richards and panel. Monique Scipio-Daniel, please. I am the president of the National Primary School Principals Association. NAPSPA was first established in 1994, and it represents primary school principals across Trinidad and Tobago with a mission to advance education through advocacy and professional development. And we will be addressing issues affecting our members in the education sector. In terms of our mission, we provide a united voice on matters of national concern, which affects the lives of its members and the cause of education. We assist members to develop themselves professionally, educationally, morally, and culturally, to assist members in the effective discharge of their duties, and to work harmoniously with national, regional, and international organizations with similar aims and objectives. Our report today will be responding to your inquiry in the underperformance at the key levels of examinations. We will be addressing the truancy, the dropouts, the adequacy of the Student Support Services Division. We would have received a lot of information, a lot of feedback through surveys from our principals nationwide, and we have highlighted trends, challenges, and actionable solutions. And we look forward to engaging in this meaningful discussion, hoping for good solutions and solutions that are going to have a lasting impact on Trinidad and Tobago and our education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go now to the president of the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools, Ms. Hicks-Rayburn.
Thank you, Chairman. The Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools is indeed grateful for the opportunity to be part of this meeting. As a major stakeholder in our education system, representing our members, principals of secondary schools, we seek to provide a high measure of support for our fraternity. We look forward to making a valuable contribution to this meeting, recognizing the numerous challenges and demands of the 21st century environment and the critical role of the importance of a functional education system to not only our children, but our nation's development. We look forward to an engaging discussion. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Lumpkin, opening comments, please. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Richards. As I begin, I remind those present and those viewing that tutor also represents members of both association of principals of primary school and secondary schools. We are the legal recognized majority union. And as the majority union of all educators in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a pulse of what is taking place in the education system. We continue to make representation as well as advocacy, not only in areas of industrial relations, professional development, salaries. I know most people think of us as just advocating for salaries. However, We are pleased to be here this morning to be part of this Joint Select Committee, and we are hopeful that our contributions can impact on the education system. Let me at this time apologize to the committee for the late submission of our data. We were really trying to compile as broad as possible and specific in some areas. We do apologize, and we look forward to an intriguing discussion ahead.
Thank you so much. Let me start by engaging the National Council of Parent Teachers Association, and just before I defer to Member Mohit, and ask if you could give us a sense, because parental involvement is one of the key positively contributing factors to student performance. And over the years, anecdotally, I have heard that parent involvement is less prevalent than it would have been a decade or 20 years ago. Would that be a correct assumption based on your experiences? And what kind of impact do you think that is having, if it is indeed so, on student performance at these key levels?
Yeah, and thank you again. Your statement is definitely potent. We have been trying to ensure that all our parents understand the need, the importance, and the relevance of parental involvement and also engagement in all our schools. And we continue to advocate and to encourage all our parents, especially at the time of registration of their students, to be deeply involved and intricately involved in the lives of their children. Because you are correct, and I always make the boast that any parent, the children of parents who are involved in the lives of their children will, not might, or maybe will do well at the end of their educational semester at primary and ECCE and the secondary schools. So that the issue is really a clear one. Getting involved in your child's life through your education system is definitely going to enhance education of your children, and your children are ultimately going to do well. We continue, members of the panel and of course other stakeholders, to encourage all our stakeholders that when you meet with the students, when you meet with their parents, encourage them to become involved and actively involved at that in the child's life through affiliation with the National PTA in the first instance, and of course, engaging at the Parent-Teacher Association level at all our schools.
Member Mohit, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, Mr. Stewart, happy 65th anniversary in advance. All right. And I want to go straight into your submission and the questions. Your submission on page 2, I'm reading that, you know, your report mentioned several socioeconomic challenges which contribute to students' underperformance, specifically outlining financial constraints, unstable home environments, as well as nutrition and health issues. Now, considering the financial constraints part of it, which was mentioned in the report, the Ministry of Education provides a school supply grant as well as remediation programs for students who may need additional tutoring and so on. I want to ask you here this morning whether you are aware of any challenges that students may have been facing in accessing these initiatives, such as the school book grant, as well the school supplies and book grant, as well as the remediation program provided by the ministry. And if yes, whether you can identify for us here some of the challenges faced in accessing grants and programs provided by the Ministry of Education. And as it relates, I'll just group everything together so you know we can move quickly. As it relates to the nutrition aspect of it, nutrition and health issues, I want to ask you specifically referencing the school nutrition program, whether it's still operational and whether there are any challenges that students may experience in accessing this intervention.
Thank you very much, Member Mohit. With regards to the book grant in particular, some parents have made contact with us with regards to easy accessibility from the school level. In other words, principals and of course teachers for some reason are not making the application for the book grant easily available to our parents. One parent in particular has called me to say that her school in particular, and this is a rural school, has not even mentioned anything to the parents relevant to the book grant. So there needs to be a wider reach, a wider engagement of parents specific to being able to apply and making the application, because it's based upon needs assessment, making the application easy enough for the parents to understand the format and the criteria for applying and being able to make the application to be able to access this particular book grant. Relevant to the vacation revision program, I'm happy to announce that over time, and of course, the data will show about 4,000 plus students so far have been able to access the vacation revision program. The NPTA was involved in part of the program last year, 2024, and the feedback that we got actually attending these sessions indicate that it is taking root. And of course, we need to continue to collaborate with the ministry and other stakeholders in order to ensure that our charges or children could access these vacation revision programs, because the statistics reaching us as well have indicated that the results have been commendable in some instances as a result of the remedial work that is being done at this particular via these particular programs. Relevant to our submission on nutrition and health issues, I would ask Mr. Ramatali, but our specific reference here, Member Mohit, was referring to the at-home arrangement with regards to nutrition and health issues. But permit me please to turn over to the first Vice President, who is a part of the School Nutrition Program Committee, and she'll be able to give you further guidance on this. Mr. Ramatali.
Yes, thank you so much. From my sitting on the representing the organization on the school feeding program, I know also Mr. Lumpkin is there, and we have been doing a tremendous work, the NSDSL, in providing nutritious breakfast and lunches for children across the country. And we have not had any complaints thus far with the meals provided to our children. So I think in terms of providing 1/3 of the RDA, the daily required nutrition, those who receive the lunches are satisfied.
And if I can just ask one additional question. Mrs. Stewart, in terms of the vacation revision program, I know you mentioned your feedback and so on, but in your report, specifically speaking to unstable home environments, how are you dealing with this challenge? Yes, you would have a success rate, you would have that 4,000, but then you would face issues with people who are facing this very same issue of unstable home environments. How are you dealing with that? How are you working with the Ministry of Education on this particular issue to ensure that the numbers are increased in terms of persons accessing this program?
Yeah, thank you again. This is really a work in progress. And throughout our advocacy, especially when we go to our PTA meetings, we continue to advise our programs that there are facilities, there are programs, there are aids out there that can be available to them. And of course, they need to reach out and of course, make use of these facilities and these particular programs. We are also looking at other ways and means that we can reach the unreached. Because many times when we go to our PTA meetings, we always say we are speaking to the converted. And one of the challenges we face, which we are working really very hard on, is to be able to reach those otherwise unreached parents who are not even aware of what is out there, so that their children can be a part of the entire system. And we are embarking on, we can probably talk about that at some other point in time, on a parenting program where we are hoping to go into the byways and the highways and the hedges in order to reach the unreached, as it were, through a type of crusading kind of arrangement where we can now be able to be in direct contact and engagement with those parents and encourage them to be able to take their children to these particular programs.
Mr. Stewart, if I could just intervene for a second. I hear you, but there's a disaggregation that needs to be made between and you can tell me if I'm correct in my assumption or not, because this is my anecdotal experience. The denominational schools have stronger parent-teachers association memberships and participation. Would that be correct?
Yes, I will want to agree with you on that. They do have a stronger tie with regards to the parenting
Right. So
involvement.
the issue of parental involvement, by and large, exists with primarily the government-administrated schools, correct?
Correct, yes, correct.
And, you know, the statement you just made there about these programs and these initiatives to get parents involved, I've had the honor to serve in this parliament for the last 9+ years, and I've heard that over and over and over again without any seeming progress in the correct direction. So what are we missing? Because we keep hearing about these programs to improve parental involvement, particularly in the government-administered schools. And the government has a lot of resources.
Yes.
The very remedial program you spoke about, which is very commendable, the government saw there was a gap and is investing $10 million a year in the remedial program. There was a significant challenge in getting parents to send their children to the remedial programs. So what are we missing here? We must be missing something, because decade after decade, the parental involvement issue is getting worse and not better, despite a number of initiatives as you've outlined. What is not happening? What's the gap?
Let me say that sometimes our parents are complaining about the time being allotted to them, time off being allotted to them to be able to attend parent-teacher association meetings. And probably the time has come, members, for especially government workers to be given compensatory time off in order to attend PTA meetings. The back end of that, of course, might be that the time off might be given and parents will find other things to do but to attend parent-teacher association meetings. And of course, there are ways and means and mechanisms that we can deal with that. But we really want to admonish the powers that be, that if we are taking education seriously, and more so taking parental involvement and engagement seriously, we have to allot the required time off for our parents to attend meetings. Of course, we are also looking at other ways and means. Just before this meeting, I was talking to a principal in a rural area in South Trinidad, and she was saying, Mr. Stewart, the only available time for a parent-teacher association meeting is really at 10:30 in the morning, because where we live, accessibility to transport is difficult, and parents are not going to be able to get out of here safely to get back to their homes. So 10:50 is the time. Whatever strategy, whatever mechanism is necessary needs to be put in place to ensure that we do get the outcome that we desire. In addition, not meaning to prolong this issue, and you are making reference, Dr. Richards, to government schools. The time has probably come as well for the government to insist that all government schools have a PTA, and more than that, that these PTAs are aligned and affiliated with the only legally recognized body, Act of Parliament 1876, the Trinidad and Tobago National Council of Parent-Teacher Associations Incorporated. This is something that we are seriously considering to again appeal to the powers that be to ensure that all those schools, bar none, most of the government schools are aligned with the National Parent-Teacher Association.
Member Mohit, go ahead, please.
Thank you again, Chairman. In terms of the school feeding response that was given, yes, I hear you that, you know, it's been working fine. You have no complaints, and that's all well and fine as well in terms of responding to the committee. But in your report, it says poor nutrition and inadequate health care. Have you expanded, have you been able to expand to facilitate those students facing issues as such at home, you know, to encourage, you know, school participation or presence at school?
Okay, great. Yes, it's something that we need to consider. Listen, there are times when students come to our schools, depending primarily on the school nutrition being provided by this particular program. And I lament sometimes, especially when the school is just starting at the start of the school term, the school academic year or the school term, when sometimes the nutrition or the food that's being provided with a particular nutrition that they need through the program that Mrs. Ramatali espoused on. So we need to ensure that parents are limited sometimes with regards to being able to provide for their own children. But we also need to ensure that parents sign up for the program and of course that their children are able to avail of the meals provided by the school nutrition program.
Thank you. Any other questions, Member Mohit? Okay, we go to Member Singh now. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staying in line with my colleague, Member Mohit's objective, which is really to assess the current performance level at key examination checkpoints in relation to underperformance by our students. I want to turn to curriculum. Your submission mentioned that the overloaded curriculum, especially at CSEC and CAPE levels, lead to stress and burnout among students and may contribute to students underperforming. Could you further elaborate a little bit on how the curriculum at this level is overloaded? Could you give us some examples of that? And while I'm at it, Mr. Chairman, I want to also raise another point regarding the shortages of teachers. And this one, any of the groups associated here today, preferably Mr. Lumpkin, can also chip in here. In this thing about limited access to qualified teachers, particularly in primary schools, which contributes to students' underperformance. I want to know, in terms of these schools where we have identified that teacher shortages is an issue, when you speak to persons who apply for teaching, the first thing they will tell you is that the Teaching Service Commission, we are waiting them to call us to interview. Sometimes you hear cases of persons waiting 15 years and so on. So, Mr. Lumkim, just keep that second part of the question in your mind, but let the NPTA answer the first part and then I'll come back to the second part. Chairman, with your leave.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, Member Singh, please allow me to ask you to repeat the question again. I got kind of sidetracked.
First question was about curriculum overload.
Right.
And your comment on curriculum overload.
Could you advise me of the page just for reference? Because I know that we have a 25-page document.
Page 2 of your submission.
Good. Okay, fine. Thanks. 1 second. Right. And of course, the curriculum has come into focus again, especially quite recently. Members, you'll be aware that our Prime Minister designate Young recently elaborated on the fact that there needs to be a look at the curriculum. One of the issues that we are facing, though, whilst we are looking for curriculum overload, is in particular the delivery of the curriculum, because we can change the curriculum at all levels and we can change the curriculum so many times, but if our educators are not adequately able to deal with and deliver the curriculum in such a manner, because of course we know that the examinations, members, are based upon adherence to the curriculum, bottom line. So if our teachers and our educators are not able to properly deliver the curriculum, we can change the curriculum several times and still not get the effect that we want to. Relevant to the overload, we are looking at our lesson plans, for example. Are the lesson plans adequately, properly executed, and or schemes of work? I know that teachers will produce schemes of work ever so often. Are they sufficiently able enough and less burdensome to be able to allow the students to understand what is being delivered? I looked just this morning at a session where a teacher in delivering or in teaching his students about angles, and more than chalk and talk, he was able to use an open door system in order to show the children what is the 90 degrees angle. what's an obtuse angle, etc. So that sometimes whilst we are using the curriculum, we have to make the curriculum relevant as well to the students who are in front of us, especially because we all know that there are different learning styles of our children. And I was really pleased with this particular teacher who was able to use that door system so that a child
Mr. Stewart, if I could interrupt you, you're going into a different area here now. We're talking about curriculum overload. Do you have you done any studies? Have you done any official scans to indicate that there is an official or an empirical, there is empirical evidence that the students are being overloaded, or is this an anecdotal observation?
Okay, it is strictly anecdotal, and of course, we would want to go into doing a deep dive in order to show and to prove where the curriculum has been overloaded. Right, so that's anecdotal.
Thank you so much. The second question posed by member Singh had to do with teacher shortages. Would you like to comment on it? And certainly Mr. Lumpkin can chime in on this too.
Well, we made public just last year at our annual conference of delegates the fact that we have to interact or meet with the agency that deals with our teacher shortage in particular. And we are appealing to the ministry to use whatever powers that they may have in order to ensure that teachers are, that schools are adequately staffed at all points in time. And made the reference even at that last meeting to the fact that there are so many acting positions from time to time. And of course, it's time that we also look at ensuring that we move out of this acting role and of course being able to substantiate and place principals, substantive principals, acting principals and teachers in all departments, in all our schools.
When did that meeting take place?
Sorry, we had our annual conference of delegates last year in November, and we made a public call then. Mr. Matali wants to intervene at this time.
Yes,
please.
yes, Dr. Richards. I am involved with the St. George East District. And from last year into, well, for the last 2 years, many schools, I have visited, and the principals will report to parents that they are missing teachers. And I'm speaking about primary schools. And I think that still exists. I would not call the names of the schools, but tutor would be aware of that also. Just yesterday, I was at another school, and the principal was speaking about, teachers who are on maternity leave, teachers who have retired, teachers who passed away, and these children are left untaught. And I think that is something the Ministry of Education and the Teaching Service Commission must look at, because if we look at, and I can say for a fact from visiting schools, that there are many schools across the country where there are no teachers. And that is nothing that we are making up, but it is.
You're saying there are many schools across the country where there are no teachers. Are you saying there are no teachers in the school, or are you saying there is a deficit of teachers in the school at some level? Are you suggesting there are schools with no teachers? Because no is absent.
Well, besides teachers being absent for whatever reason, there are schools in many subject areas, I should say, missing teachers.
Thank you.
For a fact, some PTAs have come together because of exams and so on, are paying for teachers in various subject areas to come to ensure that their children will pass CSEC, the CSEC exam.
Mr. Lumpkin, would you care to contribute to this scenario, this issue?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Richards, and thank you, Member Singh, for asking this question. There may be at the surface level appear to be a shortage of teachers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. However, we have to take many factors into consideration. The Teaching Service Commission is a body that has been entrusted to hire teachers in Trinidad and Tobago. And we want to say on the onset that we support the concept of an independent body that is insulated from political or other interference when it comes to the hiring, firing, disciplining, promotion of our teachers, educators in Trinidad and Tobago. However, when that body is understaffed and under-resourced, when we look at the commissioners being part-time, they only meet twice for the month, and they are challenged in terms of filling of the vacancies and promotion. But there's another factor we have to take into consideration. The information flow from the Ministry of Education, which is a body that would have the established positions. And when there are vacancies, if due to whatever reasons, retirement, compulsory, exiting the system and so on, if they are not given the information in a timely manner, then they cannot move towards having those vacancies filled. There's another aspect as well too, the denominational boards. And when it comes to filling the vacancies in their particular schools, they use the concordat in a way such that they have to get their particular feet into those schools. People might be aware at this point, there is a court intervention by the denominational schools in the process of new appointments to their schools. And that in itself is stymieing the filling of vacancies as well. We have to look at our culture as well too, Dr. Richards. Even our own educators sometimes do not promote a career in teaching because of whatever experience they would have had. We would have career days in a number of schools. Do we include the teaching service in those career days? We bring doctors, lawyers, etc., etc. In Trinidad and Tobago, do we have a direct career path for our educators? And I will say no. A lot of times it is filled by persons who are awaiting jobs in other fields. As we can say for male as well too, the energy sector has been attracting a number of our males.
So you're saying it's looked upon in some instances as a transition job and not a full life career. How, yes, from your interactions, Mr. Lumpkin, with your membership, what, and I'll ask this of the other leaders of the other delegations with us today, how profound or critical is this issue of teacher shortage in Trinidad and Tobago?
It is critical at this time, affecting a number of schools, because when you have places not filled, then you have our administrators, principals, vice principals, etc. They have to now, some of them have to teach a class and administer, the leadership of the school as well too. There are some areas, sometimes some classes do not have a teacher, primary and secondary. So some of the subject areas of the secondary schools are not attracted. There are some that are filled, and you have your order of merit list very low, but there are some that require to be filled. TVET is one area, Dr. Richards and members of the committee. It's an area that has been sorely lacking over the years. And we're seeing such that there are students who are willing to go into the TVET areas, yet still they don't have the teachers there for the offerings. And sometimes, that is inhibiting the whole education system.
But of course, Mrs. Scipio Daniel, what has been your experience with the issue of teacher shortage? Is it something that you've seen also that's profound?
Yes, Dr. safety. So the entire thing it's a terrible situation. And we try to manage as best as we could. But if a teacher is ill and or on maternity and cannot be there, we have to manage as best as we can. But there is learning loss.
Put a pause, please. Let me just bring in Ms. Hicks-Rayburn from the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools. And what is your perspective on this teacher shortage issue? Is this something that you're also seeing as a critical issue in the education sector?
Most definitely at the secondary level. Our members also experience a degree of there is a lack, let's say, of resources, human resources. And as Mr. Lumpkin would have indicated, for the Teaching Service Commission, there seems to be a break in the system in terms of the flow, in terms of the ability to release teachers in a timely manner. What we have in some instances, Richard,
I'm listening. Sorry, go ahead. I apologize. Yeah.
Yes, what you have in some instances where a school may be awaiting a teacher in a particular post, and the principals are responsibility, of course, to interact efficiently and as repeatedly and as very often we have to go to the ministry and make that request of the secondary systems, this secondary section. And you will get the response that we are waiting for this teacher to be released from, or the Teaching Service Commission we are waiting for the Teaching Service Commission to release the teacher from one school to another. That is a scenario that exists in schools presently. So you will have, as far as possible, efforts are made by the principal, middle management to supervise, or as far as possible, the existing teachers will be then, let's say, extended in terms of number of classes that they are assigned as far as possible, because there is a workload. They have a limit as to what they are, a quota that they can in fact teach in relation to ministry guidelines. And you cannot exceed that. A teacher cannot exceed a particular workload. And therefore, there are unfortunate situations where there are some classes that they're without a teacher, right? So as of up to yesterday, we would have a parent-teachers meeting, and I had to appeal to parents, this is the reality, because you would have, and you made the point, yes, in the board schools, that exists as well, because I am very aware that even at stakeholders meetings, APS as well as APAS, the Assisted Principals Association, continuously appeal for the need for the release or for the posting of teachers in a timely manner.
Thank you. Member Singh, final two questions, then we go to Member Naked. Member Singh, your final questions, please, in this round.
Thank you, Chair. Just circling back to something that some of the members would have spoken about in terms of the overload and the curriculum. I want to find out, is there any correlation between the curriculum that teachers are asked to present with extra classes? Because you hear all the time that students complain that teachers tell them, well, if you don't get it in school, see me after. Is there a policy? Is there anything in relation to ethics at school for teachers to let their students come to them after hours of school to present the curriculum so that these students can pass exams? What have any of the agencies here done in relation to that information as it relates to the curriculum delivery, where students are told, and then most cases, some of these students are asked to pay for extra classes? I would like to have a comment on this, Chair, and with that, I'll move on.
Thank you. Start with Mr. Stewart on that. Mr. Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Richard, and thank you, Member Singh. There seems to be, and I want to use the word mafia guardedly with regards to the extra classes that parents have to succumb to in order to assist their children with extra lessons or private lessons. Because in our humble view, there is no reason why the educator, the teacher cannot adequately deliver the curriculum for the specified time allotted in a school day and having to resort to extra lessons or extra classes. So that there needs to be some kind of understanding as to the reason or reasons why, if a teacher is unable to fulfill a day's work in his class, why is he asking or why is she asking for extra lessons? Now, I must admit that some teachers do this pro bono. I have known myself. Teachers would come early in the morning, they will do lunchtime sessions, and they will do afternoon sessions, primarily in the standard 5 classes as you prepare for SEA. All of this pro bono. And we want to applaud and commend those educators who would venture into those particular fields in order to ensure that their charges, that the children are ready and for the examination. But we really, really would not want to encourage teachers who would, as it were, hold back somewhat from the daytime classes and want to resort to almost making it mandatory to attend afternoon private classes.
Mr. Lumpkin?
Thank you, Dr. Richards. This particular issue, one cannot just look at and say broadly that teachers are holding back. There are factors that will inhibit proper delivery of curriculum at the schools. So you have times where you have disruptions, etc. And then we would have had very hot classes recently. And as you know, once the temperature is hot, you have to kind of taper down in terms of the teaching. Tutor does not encourage our members into holding back for the sake of having lessons afterwards. That is something.
Let's put a pause. While I agree with you, tutor, I'm sure doesn't do that. But what does tutor do to discourage it? Because while I understand there are some teachers who would operate in this realm pro bono, I have heard on numerous occasions, parents tell me that the teacher told the child or the parent, well, your child didn't want no extra lessons, so that's not my problem. So yeah, I'm glad that Member Singh asked the question on numerous occasions. It is so obscene sometimes, and the ministry has been asked this question in the Parliament, that the ministry has a policy that they frown on it. But it is happening. And a teacher in a classroom paid by the state to deliver a curriculum to me asking for extra money outside to complete the curriculum is obscene.
It's unethical.
Of interest.
It's unethical. But once it's outside of the school hours, we and the ministry will have little jurisdiction in addressing that. The ministry will look at what is taking place during the school day. And it is in that instance that the Ministry of Education can monitor and ensure that a certain level of delivery of the curriculum based upon the conditions as well too. Because I can tell you that the ministry has the policy of inclusive education, whereby you will have students with learning deficiencies and so, however, not giving the support. So it's a broad area. But in those areas where we have educators doing that, it is unethical. And we say that to them as well too. But by the law, they are not really breaking anything once it's outside.
My concern, yes, they're not breaking any law, but my concern is what is being done to stop it. They may not be breaking the law, but they're engaging in unethical activity that puts parents and children at a great disadvantage. Member Nakid, you can go ahead, please. Thank you for your responses. Member Nakid?
Yes, sir. To Mr. Stewart, your submission stated that technical barriers, such as the digital divide, created disparities in learning opportunities, as well as limited integration of technology in teaching. What are the challenges students potentially face with access to technology at schools, community centers, or libraries? And can you elaborate on what contributes to inadequate technology integration at schools?
Okay, thank you very much, Member Nakin. Let me put you on to our education officer, Mrs. Leacock Sargent, who will handle that question. Please, sir.
Good morning again, Dr. Paul Richards and members.
We're hearing you. Go ahead, please. I think your mic is muted again, Mr. Stewart, so we're not hearing your colleague.
My apologies. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Dr. Paul Richards and members. My name is Ayana Leacock Sargent, and I am the National Education Officer. With respect to your question in terms of the technology barrier, as we know that there are some students that live in the rural areas and do not have access to technology, whether it be Wi-Fi or whether it be a hard device, whether it be a tablet or a laptop, or some device that can allow them to enter Zoom, to enter any learning platform. And also, you know that there are some students with limited funds that cannot even purchase any device. And there are some homes currently, as we speak, that do not even have Wi-Fi. So when the conversation of technology being a barrier, it is real. We may not be able to understand it because we have Wi-Fi at our homes. But when you look at the wider society and the wider country, and that pertains to Trinidad and Tobago, there are people that are living in the 21st century, 2025, without Wi-Fi or even a device. So that in itself is a barrier for learning. Because what if the school itself has a Google platform and the work is loaded on that Google platform? How will that child obtain the information he or she needs? Of course, there's the other aspect where the child may be able to write it down from the blackboard. But the Google platform or whatever learning tool that the school uses allows the student to interface with the document and resubmit it for correction. And that particular child, is not able to do that because of that barrier of not having Wi-Fi at their home or even having a device to even enter into the conversation of being to participate with the work. And it is a real issue.
Thank you. Member Naked?
Then we can refer to what was initially said by Mr. Stewart, that we hope to have enough money allocated at the upstream rather than at the downstream, at the back end, as he said. So what is being done to address that? That we can make sure that, well, we know that the laptops were cut down. So, we don't, that's just a fact. What is being done to address that digital divide then? That in not only from the learning part, but from the teaching part as well in schools. Has there been, in other words, let me be quite clear. I love what you have said, all the stakeholders so far. I would like to know, other than just confirmation of what we know, who are on the ground, because I come from a family of educators. Other than advocacy, what concrete measures can you guys take to make sure that divide is closed, that we have that technology from the teaching aspect and from the learning aspect? Mr. Stewart?
Closing that gap is not as easy as clicking your finger or waving a wand. It will take a lot of data gathering, because you need to gather the data. You need to figure out what part of Trinidad and Tobago is experiencing this. That's for starters. Then you will need to do training, and training doesn't only speak to the person who's using the device, but other persons in the household who have to help this child go on to the device. So you're talking about maybe countrywide training for persons who will help the student be successful while using the device. When you have done all of that, you also have to figure out whether the region or wherever that child resides or children reside, if the Wi-Fi can hold the bandwidth, if they have enough towers there. So it's not as easy as saying, let's figure out how many children or how many schools or how many region don't have any Wi-Fi, and let's put it.
Ms. Leacock, Sergeant, following Member Nakid's intervention, what you're saying is even after this country experienced a whole pandemic like the rest of the world, even after we would have had data coming from performance of students at different levels because of the impact of the pandemic and going to an online learning environment, even after all of that, you're trying to tell me that the data doesn't exist present to know what students have Wi-Fi, what students have devices, what students have to share devices in a household, etc. We still don't have that information. That's what you're saying?
Well, we would have the data coming out of the pandemic, but we are in a new year, 2025, and of course, we would have new persons coming onto that, simply because the pandemic didn't only create a void with students learning, it created a void with parents losing their jobs. So that list or that data that you would have collected after COVID, you now have to go back to the drawing board and update that list and make it current. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not saying that the data does not exist. I'm saying that we need to update the data.
Thank you. Member Nakid, go ahead, please.
I find that a bit, well, for lack of a better word, I find that a bit reflective. Because if we have data, as you said, coming out of the pandemic, that's not too far back. That's contemporary. And given what we know from the CSO and so, data normally lags behind. So I am just saying, with that data that we have, could we not work on that until we have updated our statistics? Could we not work on that data to decrease the divide? Because there's no coincidence, given the underperformance that we are seeing in schools across the board. So I mean, it's something that, you know, it's something that is so grave and so important and elemental to where we want to progress as a nation. And it starts with the data. Why isn't whatever data we have not being used to decrease that divide? Because I can give you an anecdotal experience of going to my former primary school of Rotary Boys. And it was the infrastructure when it comes to technology is absolutely horrendous. And that's a school that used to be one of the lights in primary school. And I mean,
I fully agree with you. Unfortunately, our stakeholders here can't answer that question. It's an extremely valid question, but we know who the question is to be posed to. Continue, please.
Yes, it was more a statement, Chairman, than a question. And anyway, as you said, we're coming out of the pandemic and so. It falls in line with my next question. The remedial classes, do you have statistics of how that has helped? I mean, I've heard some praise in light of that, but it was widely reported that we had a lot of absentees and so from those remedial classes. Do you have any data, whether it be you, Mr. Stewart, or Mr. Lumpkin, as to how successful were those remedial classes? Did it reflect in the following official examinations that took place? Can you help me with that?
Well, we did indicate on one of our documents that they are what are considered to be schools of focus. At the primary level, there are 80 such schools of focus. And there has been, based upon the remedial education program, a 50% increase in students' average weight at these particular schools. Now, these schools of focus are where there has been underperformance, which is topical and we are talking about now. And based upon the remediation education program, there has been an increase in the performance of our students at these schools. In addition, 45% of those schools experience a decline in the percentage of students scoring under 30%. That's like a benchmark with regards to the SCA results. So that there has been a decline, and of course, these results are as a consequence rather of the remedial program introduced by the ministry.
So you're indicating that those that actually attended the remedial programs, there was an increase in their productivity as far as the results were concerned.
Well, as making reference particularly to the remediation programs offered to the schools of focus, the 80 primary schools of focus, they have been singled out for special, well, let me use the word preference, for special attention and care with regards to the performance of the students at those schools. So yes, there has been an improvement in the results coming out of those schools of focus at the primary level.
Can you tell us of the 80 schools that the ministry identified would have been the point of focus, what percentage of students who would earmarked actually participated in the remedial works program, sorry?
Well, I'm not talking about the vocation program in particular, Dr. Richards. I'm talking about the terminology being used for these particular schools of focus is called remedial education program. So that if school A, for example, is a school of focus, the program would involve the students at that school. And those results have been improving over time based upon the special intervention of the ministry at those schools.
Do you have the data to give us a sense of what the improvement levels were like in the main subject areas that were being administered to?
Well, as I did indicate, of those 80 primary schools, 50% of the students involved in those schools as a whole.
What I'm asking for is the actual percentage increases in performance. If you have data on that, not just saying they improved.
We do not have, and let me make a point here as well, that in preparing for this exercise, we did ask for the data from the Ministry of Education. Now, they did, of course, send us some information, though somewhat late, but we need to do a deeper dive and get further statistics from them with regards to the pointed question you are asking.
Thank you, Member Naked. Final question, and we move to Member Ford, please.
Well, based on what you just said, Mr. Stewart, what do you suggest, given your submission, that could further progress what has been started as far as the remedial programs? Do you have anything you can offer us that would further help?
Yes, so whilst there have been gains, we have asked as well that educators must, of course, continue to monitor the progress that is being made on a continuing basis and ensuring that all these particular schools, these participating schools in the remediation program, these schools of focus, have adequate access to trained personnel, and that the programs continue, as I said before, to be monitored and evaluated to ensure that they are really bearing fruit over time.
I continue to hear, and I have to ask this question. You continue to say about educators further monitoring, and I heard before about teachers giving lessons pro bono and all of that. I think as part of a very important ecosystem around education, whether it be rising poverty in certain low-income families and so, I think it's very important. And this is going to lead to a question. Teachers are already, in my opinion, not adequately paid. And when we talk about pro bono and ethics concerning lessons and so, and this could go to Mr. Lumpkin as well. You know, why is there not more emphasis placed on getting further resources for teachers, that we don't always have to ask them to go above and beyond in an already challenging environment? What would you say to that?
Well, you directing to me or to Mr. Lumpkin?
To both.
Lumpkin, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you very much, Member Naked. Thank you for that observation in terms of the remuneration of our educators. And I totally agree, the union totally agrees. We have always been advocating at the level of the Ministry of Education. That is the body that is supposed to provide the necessary resources to our educators. Our colleagues at the Principals Association will always lament that their direct funding does not come at a sufficiently quick time in order for them to provide. There are certain basic provisions that they are getting challenges with, toiletries, stationery, etc. And this has been the challenge. Secondary schools will tell you that their allocations have been cut over the years. And it is a great challenge that some of our teachers, sorry, have to dip into their pockets in order to provide resources from their small salaries as well. We have taken this to the CPO, and he said it is the function of the Ministry of Education that he cannot provide allocations for that in terms of resources. And so when we go back to the Ministry of Education, they are saying at this time there's financial constraint, budgetary constraints, and so. But how can we now ask our educators to perform and to deliver the curriculum without the much needed resources, and not just resources within the classrooms, the support. And I know we will deal with Student Support Services Division. We need to have that division adequately resourced, both human resource as well as other resources for them to function properly. The special education teachers, we need to have, they have cluster of schools. There should be dedicated teachers, plural, at all our schools to address special education. What about the guidance counselors, child psychologists, social workers? They are not sufficient. They are in clusters. And how can they perform adequately and address some of the needs of our students if they are not given the resources? And we could go more on that.
I can well imagine. Let me just give you a housekeeping heads up. The discussion is so intense and fulsome that we haven't even gotten through the first of 4 issues papers. So I'm just letting you know and putting you on notice that we will be inviting you back for a second session to complete this in the not too distant future. So we apologize for not getting to all the stakeholder groups, but we've engaged you in some of the questions anyway that we've been asking the first issues paper, okay? So we apologize for that, but a lot of the discussions here are necessary discussions, and we appreciate your contributions. Member Ford, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, and that was a very important input in terms of, you know, in terms of having the meeting going forward. I would like to move on to the support system. And again, I know we are on Mr. Stewart's, on Mr. Stewart case, you know, to put it mildly, and we're looking at the wait times. In your submission, it stated that when considering the effectiveness of support systems for underperforming schools, I'm quoting you now, long waiting periods for assessments and interventions lead to students falling behind. End of quote. And that is stated on page 5Q1 of your submission. So my question to you and team, Mr. Stewart, in your experience, how long do assessments and interventions usually take in these instances? The instances that you refer to with regards to the long waiting period and children falling behind. Could you elaborate, please?
Okay, so again, thank you, Member Ford. Let me put you on to Education Officer again. On this one, Mrs. Leacock Sargent.
Good morning again to all. Good morning to Mr. Ford. So as a fellow educator myself for many years, I have heard parents complain about waiting for so long to even see a psychologist or to even get their child tested for whatever reason. And sometimes they leave a standard. So let's say the process or a teacher may have recommended a particular child to be tested. And that parent started the process at standard 1. Sometimes not until standard 3, to the beginning of standard 3, is that child even getting an appointment to be tested. And we all know that in order for a child who has learning challenges, the process of concession does not start in standard 5. It starts maybe in standard 2, where there is a history of this child having this particular challenge. And so therefore in 5, when that child has to sit the STA exam, that child has a history documentation that he or she has this particular issue and therefore is requiring additional time at the SCA level. So when that child gets tested at 3, maybe, or even 4, it's difficult to accumulate that history in order to warrant the concession. So you're not only, the delay in the system is not only creating frustration in the minds of the parents, but it's also hindering the child from acquiring additional support system that he or she may require at the SCA level.
And again, follow up, Mr. Chairman. But the delay between year 1 to year 3, what are the actual reasons for those delays? Identify, let's say, two reasons that would cause that delay, because you're talking about a 3-year period.
So what they are saying is that the statistics is saying, and that is coming from the psychologists, the statistics is there are a lot of students, whether it be female or male, coming to them that are having issues. So in essence, what they are saying that there are a lot of students that are coming to them with issues, and therefore there's a backup.
So you're saying that the psychologist may see them in year 1, but the follow-up and further feedback would not come until year 3? That's what you give. That's what you're saying there?
I'm saying that, and I'm also saying that there are some parents who haven't even seen the psychologist, and the date that they would have gotten to see the psychologist is like 2 years.
Oh. Right.
That's what the discussion is. And that's where some parents they are getting agitated and they are frustrated with the fact that they know that their child have an issue. They're seeing that the issue is real. They cannot afford to take their child to a private facility, and therefore they are relying on the government service to allow their child to be assessed and get the necessary help that he or she may need.
Only issues as well, Member Ford, that
Sure.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Through the chairman.
Oh yeah, my apologies. Through Dr. Richards to Member Ford, is when a child comes into the school at the first year level, there needs to be a number of issues that we have to address. Psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists, etc. So that if at all, and this is where in my opening salvo I mentioned about putting monies in the front end, if at all we're able to assess each child from the get-go when they come into the classroom, so that all these issues are adequately taken care of, we are able to understand and deal with the child, because you have a history of the child from the first year and you follow through with this particular child, thousands of them, of course, all the students from that level all the way up to C-Sec and CAPE. That's one of these suggestions and recommendations that we will have when we talk about putting the monies up front to avoid and mitigate some of the issues that they face later on in life.
And to clearly put, Mr. Chairman, that child or children will be left behind. Is that?
If we could quote from an article in the newspaper from as early as 2021-22, coming out of the pandemic, student support services received more than 5,400 distress calls, and they were operating, according to this article, I don't know if it's improved since then, at 20% staffing with only 23 trained professionals. Now, my understanding is that a lot more resources has been pumped into student support services because of the pandemic and the fallout from that. But my interaction with members of staff at the Student Support Services Division is that they're still significantly understaffed and under-resourced, with a lot more load coming from learning disabilities and special needs, and also behavioral emotional issues. So there are situations where I've heard from about 4 parents that I've interfaced with that while their child may have seen a psychologist to deal with a profound issue, today, the next appointment is in 7 months. And that cannot be productive in intervening in that sort of fragile or sensitive situation with that sort of, and it's just that the professional, the psychologist or the social worker is so swamped with other cases that they can't schedule a continuous intervention program for that child, making it more productive. And that the issue here is clearly a matter of very, very limited resources from the Student Support Services Division. I know Mr. Lumpkin is very familiar with this. With ever increasing load in not only learning disabilities and special needs intervention, but now behavioral emotional issues coming on top of that. So, I mean, we're all saying the same things, but we're not seeming to get through effectively to the powers that be to create an understanding of what is necessary, particularly where a well-intentioned agency like the Student Support Services Division, because they do great work when they have the resources, there's no doubt about that, but they're just stretched to the ultimate limit. You know, I'm sorry to be opining like this, but I've heard this for 10 years.
Yeah.
Plus, you know.
That's the fact, because I think the ideal, sorry, my apologies. I think the
Right.
ideal would be to have a designated social worker attached to each school. That would be the ideal situation, because where they come now, they come in clusters, for example, except of course for the same schools of focus I had alluded to earlier, where they designate a social worker for those schools of focus only. But across the board, for all of schools in Trinidad and Tobago, there needs to be a designated school social worker attached to those schools.
And again, Mr. Chairman, the hiring of those individuals go through the Teaching Service Commission. Mr. Stewart?
So I have some data I can share with the panel here with us. And this is staff comparison of Student Support Services Division for 2020 and the 2024. There are allocations for 588 positions, 681 staffing numbers in 2024, 588 in 2020. For 2024, there are 34 development and assessment intervention personnel, school social work 211, guidance and counseling 286, and special education 132, and some managers, clerical positions, research officers, restorative practice facilitators. So, I mean, if you understand, in primary school alone, there are 18,000 students. If you look at the prevailing data globally, where 9 to 12% of learners may fall into some of the 13 categories of special needs alone. If you take 10% of 18,000, you see that this is just not enough staff. You know, and I'm not even talking about emotional behavioral problems, that's just dealing disabilities. So the issue clearly is resources. We know that in every jurisdiction, there are severe economic constraints, but I mean, we're talking about the future of the country here. So we hope it reaches the right ears, you know. Miss Hicks Rayburn, you want to make a contribution?
Thank you, Chair. It is Mrs.
Sorry.
Just to add to the discussion with regards to how strapped the system is with regard, how overloaded and how manned for the social workers and for what we have noted at the secondary level. there is a major disconnect between primary students coming into the secondary in terms of students who would have been referred and who do need that support and who would have been assessed. Sometimes the information does not come directly to, in a timely manner, to the secondary system, to at least for the students in, let's say, Form 1. And what we have found as well, after the pandemic, with the increased number of students that teachers recognize the need for additional support, the difficulty, or we have been asked, the system has been that we are required to refer a child to fill out a form, a very detailed form, to then to be given to the student support services. Teachers have to do that. But what we have found is that system itself has been so laborious. It's difficult for teachers who are asked to complete the referral form, but also the great volume of referrals, I believe, that were eventually given led to a review somewhat of the system in terms of the numbers. And we had to then, there was what led to the development of what is called the school-based intervention team, or where at the level of this, back at the secondary schools, teachers are then asked to further, we had to create, the ministry asked that this team be created where in individual schools, this team is developed to assess students. So whereas you would have had external referrals or students being referred out, there was a greater filtering or attempt to filter the numbers that were being received. And all of that we know is to grapple with or to treat with the volume, the sheer volume. So it is, again, it is a difficult task on behalf of the social SSSD, but it's also putting greater stress and frustration on the ability for teachers even to have to function. Right? So we are now asked to also assess to some extent.
Thank you. Can we go, thank you all for your contributions. Can we go to Member Singh and support systems, please? Or tailored interventions, sorry. Member Singh and tailored interventions.
Thank you, Chairman. In assessing the effectiveness of targeted interventions for school and students, you stated that one of the challenges is inconsistent execution, as interventions are not always customized to suit individual schools. And this is from the NPTA submission, page 6, question 2. I want to find out, in your expertise, what are the challenges that have emerged due to inconsistent execution or broad brush approaches to intervention strategies? And can you also provide some examples of particular that emerged at schools that would require specific targeted intervention?
Can we start with Mr. Stewart on that, please?
Yes, thanks. So I'm going to continue again, Member Singh, to Mrs. Leacock Sargent. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Singh. Could you repeat the question? You broke up a bit just now. Sorry.
So what I wanted to know is, what are the challenges that have emerged due to the inconsistent execution, or in my words, or broad brush approaches to intervention strategies? And this is in relation to your submission, where you stated that there are inconsistent execution as interventions are not always customized to suit individual schools. If you could just give us your expert opinion on that.
Okay, so in terms of programs or whatever the Ministry of Education deem necessary for particular schools, when you look at maybe a school in a rural community and you take that intervention that may be meant for a school, maybe that is heavily populated, and you take that same model and you apply it to the rural school where children in their head, in their minds, I don't have food, mommy doesn't know where the next meal is coming. I'm not sure if I'm going to have food today. When you take that same model and you apply it there, is it contextualized? Is it relevant to the student that's receiving it? And those are the questions, that we have to do when we are creating programs. We have to sort of customize it for where it will receive the most benefit. And we need to know who will it be benefiting. Because while you may create a program for students, yes, or for children, when you put it in different regions with children experiencing different issues, is it relevant to those students in that particular region? And that is where you customizing the program comes in, and that's where that program would be data-driven, because you would know the data, what the data is telling you. Is the data telling you that if I take this particular program and I put it up in a rural area, would the children benefit? How do I customize this same program that I want all the children of Trinidad and Tobago to experience? How do I customize it? It's a little bit.
I could totally relate from your argument, because I could tell you almost all the speakers today would have referred to students of schools in rural communities, and we're here in urban. I could tell you, as a farmer, going to a rural school, that is where I developed my passion for agriculture, as opposed to my colleagues who ventured into urban settings where there were no farms, there were no physical interaction with soil. And that is where my passion generated. And here I am, a farmer by profession. So I want to totally agree with you. And I want to suggest, with your leave, Chairman, that a student in a rural community, as opposed to a student in an urban community, we shouldn't be having this discussion about as the tailoring, because I believe that a student should be equally treated. And for a better word, in terms of the resources, should be equalized in rural and urban schools. And this is where I'm getting at with all of the agencies present here today. I hear your passion and your lobbying for resources. I want to join you all in that, because you all are absolutely right. And so in all your respective agencies, is there anything, any data, any statistics to show what are the inputs, or what are the resources that are shortfall, that are lacking in some of the schools in relation to others? Is there comparative data analysis? And I could just speak for, I just raised the example of agriculture, because both my primary school and my secondary school both had agriculture on the curriculum, and both had a plot of land where we can practice agriculture. Hence, in the primary school setting, I was exposed. In the secondary school, it being a and I would have slightly begged to differ a little bit, because my alma mater in terms of the secondary school is a government school, and it turned out to be a really good environment. So when we make comparison with board schools and government schools, that is something we also, we are the ones who paint the picture sometimes that, hey, it's better to go in a board school than come in a government school. And we somewhat denigrate our own government schools. And I'm a product of a government school, and I'm just saying that just to put it in perspective. But thank you. I want to move to collaboration now. In relation to collaborative efforts between government, educators, parents, and community. And I want to add another layer called corporate responsibility and corporate Trinidad and Tobago. Has your organization or have any of the organizations present faced any challenges with fostering collaboration with stakeholders? Because I'm seeing a lot of schools now getting, resources, getting IT support, getting computers, getting grants, all of these things from corporate responsibility, parents and institutions, NGOs. But from where you all sit, what are the challenges in terms of fostering these types of collaborations? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Member Singh. I know that the Ministry of Education last February 2024, embarked on Adopt a School program. And this program, the National PTA completely endorses, because we believe that education is everybody's business, and the government through the Ministry of Education cannot do it on its very own. So that there is need to be able to get corporate buy-in and corporate support in all the endeavors. We would want to extend, and of course, we have said this before, we have pronounced on this before, that we extend the corporate involvement of most of Trinidad and Tobago, all Trinidad and Tobago, in other areas as well. Take, for example, you may not be able to give finances, but of course you can give technical support, you can provide HR services, you can provide coaches, for example, for sporting facilities, you can provide cultural icons for those particular schools as you look at the holistic development of the child. So we truly, Member Singh, endorse the fact that there needs to be corporate intervention. And I make the point again that I've done before. If corporate invests its money now in the education system, those same students who they are investing these monies in are the ones who are going to be their HR managers, they're going to be their laborers, they're going to be their CSRs, etc. So invest your monies now to ensure that the end product, who is going to be your employee several years down the road, is going to be the ideal product that you will be proud of, and it's going to improve and increase the bottom line, the profit of the organization, of the company.
Well, we're running short on time. What I'd like to do, because it's a very important aspect of our conversation, and as I indicated before, we said we'll have to have you back to continue the various other sections that we planned, but of course the discussion is so intense that we are at the point we're at now. So I'm going to go to Member Naked to start to focus on dropout rates. Member Naked, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before we go into that very important issue that, in the interest of time, I would like just a brief response to something that I gathered from this meeting. And the Chair always says that we should improvise a bit, but I know we don't have time. So here's the question. Given all that we've heard today, do you, the major stakeholders, believe that it's time for the Ministry of Education to perhaps not have the overarching authority of all these things, and that there should be diversity? I just want a quick 1 minute, a 1 minute response from Mr. Lumpkin and from the NPTA, that maybe the Ministry of Education should not have this overarching authority. Maybe it's just a bit too much given the needs of a 21st century SID, a small island developing nation. Just can you all answer that?
Well, I did have some difficulty, Member Naked, in your question. Could you just repeat it for me? I'm having some difficulty in hearing you.
Given the 21st century needs of a country like Trinidad and Tobago, should the Ministry of Education still have this overarching authority over all these different problems and challenges that arise, or should it be a bit more decentralized and perhaps apportioned to different independent authorities?
Well, what I think is important to note,
Mr. Stewart, quick responses because we're running out of time. So
Okay,
I could pose a
Well,
question.
the answer is yes. I think that there needs to be an involvement and engagement of several other ministries as well, especially as you consider that education, there needs to be a whole of society, whole of government, whole of all ministries approach with regards to involvement in education. So the answer is yes, sir.
Mr. Lumpkin.
Scipio Daniel.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just
Sorry.
going across the groups to get a response to your intervention.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Mrs. Scipio Daniel, a response to Member Nakin's suggestion?
Yes, I believe that at this point we need to have all other ministries, especially the social welfare ministry, deeply involved in the school system, because the problem is not just education. It's a systematic problem. It's a systemic problem. We have parents who are dealing with poverty, not knowing how to support their children. We need to get all of the ministries involved so that we can come together with a cohesive plan to get the children back on track, because it's too big for one ministry only.
Mr. Lumpkin?
We are of the view that the Ministry of Education should be the body that oversees education, but they should be given the necessary resources. They are understaffed at this time as well too, with the support of other agencies and ministries, but they should be overarching in terms of the policy. When it comes to the hiring and so on, Teaching Service Commission could continue with the necessary resources being put in place, but the Ministry of Education should also be outfitted with persons who are highly qualified in the area of education, so that they can drive educational policies and as we said before, resources, adequate resources allocated to them.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the question that the chair would like to be asked before we end. Of the factors identified, which of them are more prevalent in primary versus secondary school students as far as the dropout rates are concerned? Whether they would be the socioeconomic factors, behavioral issues, family dynamics. Mr. Lumpkin, go take a stab at it.
And how concerned are you about the dropout rates at primary and secondary school levels, the secondary school being the more prevalent because of the age of mandatory education in Trinidad and Tobago, sometimes not traversing to when students are leaving school, but they can legally not be in school after. Is it 16?
16 years ago.
Yes.
16. We would have identified 3 areas, and they're all equally a factor in the dropouts. Some depending on the areas, some will be greater than others. We're also seeing the influence of the underworld factors as well too, and the attraction to that as well too. All of this, within the education system, we have to look at the individual as well too, and their self-esteem. And sometimes we're not too focusing on the self-esteem of our students and building that self-esteem as well too. Sometimes the focus is on the delivery of the curriculum and not in terms of emotional as well too. But all of the 3 factors, economic, parental, and academic struggles, we believe they're all equal factors in the dropout at the secondary and to our point, the primary.
Mr. Stewart? Quick answer, please.
Yeah, thank you. No, just ask the member, just repeat the question again, please. Thanks.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Mr. Stewart.
Okay.
Mrs. Hicks-Rayburn, did you hear the question?
Yes, I believe you would like to comment on the reasons for the dropout.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So our association believes that we have to be somewhat cautious with the use of the term dropout, because when you say dropout, that connotes that this child is no longer in any way providing any sort of contribution to the society. And what, in fact, based on what the responses we would have got from our membership, secondary level, we have a greater issue with, let's say, high absenteeism, but not particularly in terms of percentage dropout. But those who have chosen not to return to the secondary level, it's usually a case of, yes, financial issues, a case of frustration with having to cope with the particular curriculum. You have an issue where parents do not see the importance or do not ascribe that importance to education, and that is a reality. And it's something that it frightens me when I've had conversations with parents who may have done fairly well for themselves and have decided, I did not need, to have 5 passes, and I have fared fairly well, and therefore the same I would expect the same for my child. But we have also seen, as I said, in terms of dropout, the frustration, I believe, with the curriculum and the importance of review and improvement, or the offerings. We need to make a plug again for the technical vocational skills, which unfortunately, a lot of the government schools have workshops that are closed. There are no teachers to provide the skills for the teaching. Unfortunately, as well, the ministry did undertake to reintroduce retired teachers from the TechVox area and bring them back on contract. But we are in a situation where these contracts have not been renewed. And since the beginning of the term, there are several schools where the contract teachers were not even given a 2-year contract. They were given a year contract. But yet, some would have been placed in Form 4, and the syllabus requires that you have Form 4 and Form 5 to see that batch of students to the exam in Form 5. There needs to be a great, in terms of that, we felt that was not well thought out on the ministry's part, because right now you have some of Form 4 students, and this is the 4th week of the term.
I am loath to put you to pause, but we're running out of time. But I understand your
I can go on. Go on. But
we'll have you back. No worries about it. Mrs. Scipio Daniel, on the issue of dropouts, and then Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. On the issue of dropouts, we recognize that it affects boys more than the girls, and we are looking at how do we address it. We are having behavioral challenges affecting the children of the schools. We are looking at the family dynamic, sociometric issues such as poverty, family instability, and we also have limited tools for the tracking and addressing of the absenteeism. So what is driving the trend shows that the economic hardship is driving the absenteeism, and we want to recommend that parental engagement programs, mandatory workshops for parents, counseling to empower parents in supporting their students' attendance so that they see the importance of being at school, getting their education so that it can pull them out of the poverty that they are in. We want to advocate for mentorship initiatives, and I would have listened to the very first meeting that you would have had. And it seems as if even though they are supposed to be around 60 plus mentors, only around 30 something of them are in effect working. And we have 400 plus primary schools, and then of course the secondary schools. So the mentorship program, I am saying, we believe needs to be expanded, targeting at-risk boys and giving them that positive role model, as well as the digitizing and of the attendance monitoring system. So as soon as children are absent, they are flagged, and so we can try putting in timely intervention through the Student Support Services Social Worker Division.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Finally.
With regards to the socioeconomic factors that are facing our parents with regards to poverty, we're also looking at adolescent pregnancy as well. That does affect and that does impact on the dropout rate as well at our schools. We are looking at academic challenges where there are learning difficulties, where students are struggling academically. And I want to piggyback on Mrs. Hicks-Rayburn as well, and the need for technical vocational resurgence, because some of our students are not academically inclined. We realize that some of them could do exceptionally well with their hands, and of course getting involved in the technical vocational area is going to mean a lot to them as well. We're also looking at family dynamics and parental influence. Parents must, of course, realize the importance of education and ensuring that their children stick with the program and stay in school till the very end. And lastly, of course, we also have peer influence, where we have negative peer pressure associated with peers who devalue education and think education is not worth the while. So that is also a program we need to look at. In lastly, closing though, we also want to emphasize again the need for parental programs so that we can assist our parents in understanding the need and the importance of education. Thank you.
Thank you. Just two quick questions that we can conflate from members of the public to the National Primary School Principals Association and the National Public Secondary Schools of TNT. And the questions are, do principals have the ability to directly hire substitute teachers? If not, who does that? And has the association considered making representations to the commission to delegate to principals the ability to directly appoint teachers one and teachers assistant?
Thank you, Chair. At this point, principals do not have the ability to directly hire substitute teachers. All hiring and firing goes through the Service Commission. We can make recommendations for the substitute system. However, as I said, something is happening with it. It does not seem to be working well. And even though persons may wish to place their names on the list, when we click the links requesting the substitute teachers, it's not going through. I am not sure if it happens at the secondary school level, but at this point, we can make representation to possibly have principals recommend persons, but of course that comes with its own set of rules and challenges, because we have to ensure that persons who are coming into the school have certificates of good character and that they are going to be teaching the way we want them to teach and not going out of the box and doing things that they should not. So we also have to look at the social media influence and what is happening on their social media platforms. So we must be very careful when we bring persons into the system. So at this point, Chair, we are not able to hire or just bring persons into the school system. It has to go through the Ministry of Education and Service Commission.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for being with us today, including the officials from the National Primary Schools Principals Association, the National Council of Parent Teachers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, and the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools of Trinidad and Tobago. I think we've had quite a fulsome morning into afternoon of discussion. As I indicated before, we will certainly be setting a date, more than likely in February, early February or mid-February, to continue our discussion on this important issue. We'd like to thank you all for being with us today. We'd like to also thank members of the public for their questions and comments online, and members of our committee for their continued dedication to the important work ahead, and to the Secretariat. Thank you all to the viewing and listening audience. We appreciate you being here with us. The meeting is now adjourned. Have a great day and be safe.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right. Good meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.